Hello, I am Dr. Denise Lucy, a proud member of the Marin Women's Hall of Fame class of 2011. It is my pleasure to sit down with this year's class of Marin Women's Hall of Fame inductees. We're going to learn about their lives, careers, and journey that led them to be honored in this way. Since 1987, the Hall of Fame has inducted over 150 Marin women of distinction. Women who have made immense contributions to the county of Marin and its residents as well as the world beyond. Honorees have distinguished themselves in many fields: education, science, business and philanthropy, the arts, politics, law and philosophy, and religion. Each honoree has been a force for positive change in our community. It is a great privilege to acknowledge and document their contributions. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce Berta Campos Anicetti. She is being honored in 2024 for her pioneering work in social change and education. Thank you, Berta, for being here today. It's just an honor to see you again.
Thank you.
And to be the honoree of the Marin Women's Hall of Fame. Isn't that something?
I still can't believe it. It's such a big shock.
It is a big pleasure.
And an honor.
We were talking about, you were saying you come from a different country and then you involve and engage, and now, all these years later.
Yeah, who would have said, like, my mom would be so proud. She passed a year ago.
Did she?
She would have been bonkers more than I have.
Oh, bless her heart.
Yeah.
Well, you deserve it so much.
Thank you.
You know, you have been retired now since July of 2023 from the Latin Services of North Marin County Services. That's the nonprofit's name, right?
And North Marin Community Services?
North Marin Community Services.
Yes. We call it NMCS because it's...
NMCS. Good. And you worked there for 24 years.
I did.
And my understanding is that it's 51 years old, this nonprofit.
Yes.
And you, half of that half century, you worked there.
Yes, yes.
And you've led so many programs and so many projects.
Yeah, it's been a really wonderful place to work. People always ask, why do you stay there so long? It's like, it's a place where I always felt respected, where people gave me the opportunity to grow, to make mistakes, to learn from them. And I always felt like they could hear. I could be heard. I could be heard, and I could be who I was, and I could push for changes and programs, and people would listen. And that makes a big difference, for your career when you're trying to make change for immigrants. Sometimes there's a lot of resistance about that. And so to have an organization that is willing to do that work and to support you and to grow it, it's been an amazing experience.
Can you tell us about the mission of the organization?
Sure. Our mission is to work with youth and their families so that they can be successul. And we're a multi-service agency, so there's a lot of different programs, but I see them in kind of like chunks, right? We work with health, mental health. There is a whole child development unit. There is social services with food bank and helping people grow economically to become more stable. There is, let's see what else. We have a teen clinic in collaboration with Marin Community Clinics. So we provide services for teens, reproductive health and mental health. Let's see what else. I haven't forgotten anything else. I think those are the main ones. Yeah.
So the organization advances under-resourced communities in which regions then?
We serve Novato, but we serve a lot of Marin too. In my programs, it's bigger than Novato, because sometimes people even work in Marin, but they live somewhere else because they can afford. But they sometimes, because they work in Novato or in Marin, they have their kids in their schools, even though they live in Richmond or in Petaluma or in Vallejo, or other areas. So we serve a broader community, but our focus has been Novato for a long time.
So you launched many of these programs, right, from what I understand.
Yeah.
So when you first arrived to this organization,
I was on the board first.
Oh,
I was asked
really?
to be on the board of directors. I applied for a job, and it turned out to be something that was not what I expected, and they offered me the job, and I said I was really sorry. But so we got to know each other with Veronica Reed. She, the prior director, executive director. And then after a couple of weeks, she calls me back, and she says, Berta, would you be willing to be on our board? And I'm like, board? I've never been on a board of directors, and that's all rich people, and I don't, because my understanding of what board was is that you had to go to ask your friends for donations, right? And so she's like, oh, no, it's so much more than that, you know. And then she was saying, you know how to write grants. You could write us a grant and get us $50,000, you know, and you don't have to ask people for money if you're not comfortable. And then I said, well, I never done that before, so tell me more about it. And she talked to me about getting a couple of mentors, and I had these two guys who were wonderful, and Rick and Vince, and they took me under their wing. They showed me what it was, and I started on being a board member. And after a year, there was a big a high rate of teen births in Marin. And so there was they called them hotspots. And so the state called them hotspots. And there was a hotspot in Canal, and there was another one in Novato. And so the health department came over and talked to the center and said, you have most of the young women who gave birth were Spanish speaking. And so they said, you are the only ones having a connection with the community. Would you help us create a program? So they asked us to write a grant and a proposal so we could get a grant. And of course, that was my field. I'm a health educator. I have a master's in public health, and I had done family life education and AIDS education and all reproductive work before from my prior jobs. But I was home not working because I had a child that was 1 year old, and I wanted to wait a couple years before I went back to work.
Nice.
And so Veronica said, Berta, would you help us write this grant? I'm like, oh, of course, I know exactly who you need. And we wrote the job description, we did all the recruitment, and no one applied. We couldn't find a bilingual, bicultural, Masters of Public Health person. And we tried everywhere, we advertised, months went by, and we couldn't find a person who was qualified to develop a program. And so she said, Berta, would you come off the board and do it for us? Because you're the one who could do it. And
That's a great
I was
story.
like, oh my God.
Wow, so that's where you re-entered the workforce in this position you created and designed based on what you knew of the need.
At the time, there were 38 or 37 births to Latino young women in Novato. By the time we closed the program, which was very exciting because you hardly ever get to close a program in public health, we had 6. And they were births, so there were a lot more pregnancies. This was only the ones who decided to give birth, because no one kept track of pregnancies at the time. So yeah, and it was a lovely project. I got to work with a lot of young women and men, because it takes two to tango.
Right, it does indeed. So you finished the program because it was no longer needed?
Exactly. So then we started looking at promotores.
Yeah, what is promotores?
Promotores are natural leaders in the community who have a lot of skills. Just by the mere fact that people were able to come to another country, perhaps having to cross the border. Not everybody goes in that route, but some do. And you have to have a lot of skills to manage that. There's a lot of things you have to do in survival of being able to come to a new country, learn a new language, create a whole new life when you have nothing with you, it requires a lot of skills.
And courage.
So, yes, absolutely. And you learn about resources, you learn about figuring out how to do things in a new place, right? And so a lot of the people we work with are, they're volunteers, and they are people who usually help the neighborhood. When something happens, they're like the Nia Marita in the apartment building who does a collection when someone has a tragedy. Those kind of people. And they have a lot of skills that perhaps they don't recognize, and our job is to raise money to work on the issues that they want to work on. So typically you in prevention, you have a grant and you get money, and then you look for people to help you do the work. In this case, we try to empower the community to choose what are the issues that are important to them. And then they chose underage drinking as the one, which of course not even I expected that. I expected immigration to be the number one concern, and it turned out to be number two, because the top priority for them at the time, we had lost a lot of young people to accidents and tragedies related to alcohol use of young people. And we lost a lot of youth, and I guess that was very present in the community. And so that was the issue that they chose to work on.
So when you say they, the promotores are community people?
Yes.
That you recruit?
Yeah, we recruit them.
And they're all volunteers?
They're all volunteers. We give them a stipend for their gas and stuff. We give them a lot of trainings. We write grants to get gift cards. There's a big movement to get promotores to get hired and given a fair job, you know. But not everybody's able to do that kind of stuff right now. Everybody's sort of working on it. There is, like Medical is now, it's going to start giving reimbursement for promotores, but it's very minimal. Everybody's very excited, but when you really do all the numbers, you end up with like maybe $5 per hour for somebody. So it's not a lot of money, so we still have to do a lot of grant writing and trying to figure out a way on how to, and when you have a group of 21, it's really hard to hire 21 people, you know, so you do little by little. We have been able to hire about 4 of them in different roles throughout the organization. And so little by little, we'll be able to do more.
I see. And what about the newcomers? What is that?
The newcomer programs is something that in Marin, we have a high rate of minors and youth that are coming, sometimes even on their own, because there's a lot of problems with gangs and violence in Latin America. So there are a lot of young people coming from Guatemala, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and other countries, Venezuela. But the highest number of young people right now are from Guatemala. And so what they come sometimes to live with an aunt or a relative, or sometimes just a friend, and they don't have a lot of resources. And so what we do is that we have a 10-week social emotional curriculum that we go to the schools, and the Novatos Unified School District has a partnership with us, and they allow us to come during their English classes. And we talked about mental health, how to get used to a new country, how do you figure it out, how to get services, how do you connect, learn a little bit about how education works here, the university, you know, community college, and all of these things that, you know, when I first came to the US, I was a senior in high school, and my counselor, because I didn't speak English, decided that I wasn't gonna go to college. So she didn't give me any info. And that kind of stuff still happens, you know. People assume you don't speak the language, or you struggle with the language and you're stupid.
Right,
and
they track you somehow.
Right, exactly.
Into the non-college track.
So we talk about dreams and you know, why do you come to this country, and talk about setting goals and trying to find something to do that would, you know, match that sacrifice that your family did to be able to bring you here somehow, or that you did, because sometimes they do it on their own.
Wow, talk about bravery, yeah?
Yeah.
So you have a master's in public health, which prepared you. Tell us about your life. So you tell us when you came here and then how you led to your baccalaureate and your master's work.
Yeah, I came to senior year in high school from El Salvador. There was civil war in my country. My parents were teachers, and teachers were being prosecuted at the time. My parents worked really hard, but a lot of their friends were being disappeared, or their relatives were being disappeared because I learned about injustice and about equity and all of these terms from my father. My dad always wanted to go to protests and ask for better salaries for teachers. Teachers down there don't make as much money, and teachers here don't either. But it's much worse over there. And so I was 3 years old when I started going to protests with my dad, and trying to ask for better salaries for teachers. And so my plans were my dad was a science and math teacher. My mother taught from first grade up, and so I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a math teacher at the university level. That was my dream. And my parents didn't have a lot of resources. So in El Salvador, if you go to the public university, public high school, you can, if you get the top 3 grades, you can get a full scholarship to university. So that was my dream. I was wanting to go to the public high school so that I could try to get that grant and but because of the war, El Instituto Nacional was super dangerous to go there. There was a lot of students being kidnapped. There was a lot of activity. Young people are the ones who do most of the protests and things like that. So it was very dangerous. So my parents didn't allow me to go there, and instead they got me a scholarship to go to Sacred Heart High School. And so I ended up in a total different place. I didn't have the opportunity to get that scholarship, but it didn't matter because they ended up wanting to send my sister and I to the U.S. to live with an aunt because they were really scared that their co-workers being kidnapped or their family members, and they were saying, we lived our lives, you guys are starting, go. And I didn't want to come, so I wasn't happy here. I kept saying, Christmas, I'm leaving. I don't want to be here. But I ended up living with this aunt who had lived here forever, and I was able to go to high school for a semester and a half. I wasn't told about college because my English was very limited, but I found out on my own because I thought it was super important. My parents always thought, we don't have any money, the only inheritance we're going to give you is education. So I went to find out about City College of San Francisco. I took all my EL classes there. I spent 4 years in community college. 4 years in community college because 2 years later my parents showed up and I had to help support the household. So it took me 4 years and at 7 year total to get my bachelor's degree because I couldn't transfer until they were financially stable enough to survive mostly on their own. And so I left to go to UC Santa Cruz, and I was very lucky to get a lot of grants and work study so that I could afford that. But I would save the weekends. I would come up to the city, and the people I used to work, I was an accounting clerk, and I was able to, they saved me the jobs to do, and I would come on Saturday and work because they paid me a really good salary. And so I would commute, and I was the first driver in my family to know how to drive and own a car when I was 25 after I had gotten married. So I had to come on the buses and the Greyhound and all of that. But I would come, and then after that, I went to work. for La Clínica de la Raza in Oakland, and that's where I learned about promotores and health education. And there was a woman there, Susana Hennessy, who was incredibly supportive, and she said, you need to go to grad school because you like to design programs, and that's where you're gonna learn how to do it. But they had a prerequisite, you have to work 2 years of full-time before you could apply. And so I eventually applied to there. And was able to go 2 years to get my master's.
Wow. So you went to Santa Cruz, UC.
UC Santa Cruz.
And then you stayed at Santa Cruz?
No, I came back home, but I actually got married. I was 25 years old. And my situation, when my parents came, we asked for political asylum. And it turned out that immigration lost our papers, and in the meantime, I had a work permit that was about to expire. And my parents, my mom had a sister who became a citizen and could try to go through that process of immigration, but it was taking like 20 years at the time. Now it's much longer to become a resident here. And so when my parents came, we applied for political asylum because my dad was beat up by the cops in El Salvador. And so we had some photos and stuff, and we could sort of submit proof of those things. But they weren't giving a lot of refugee and political asylum to Salvadorians because at the time the U.S. government was supporting the government that we were saying was beating up my father. So politically, it was
impossible.
It was impossible. They weren't giving a lot of political asylum. And so I had this boyfriend, and we dated for so many years. He was from the U.S. He was half Italian, half Irish, third, fourth generation. And he said to me December before graduation, and he said, you know, we should just get married. We had been going out for 6 years. And then I said, what? And he said, is this a proposal? We should just get married. I'm like, because you need to have a permit by the time you graduate so you can work in your career and not be an accounting clerk for life. And I'm like, I'm not marrying for papers. And he's like, I'm not asking that. So we ended up getting married right after I graduated.
That's
so
lovely.
that I could work as a health educator and go with my career. And 34 years later.
Because you loved each other.
We loved each
There
other.
you go.
We have been married for 34 years.
So your parents were so key to your development. Are there any other people in your life that advanced your thinking and your being?
I've been very fortunate to have a lot of women who have been mentors. And in particularly, it was super special for me to see a few women of color that looked like me and who had gone through similar struggles to support me in whenever those hard moments came, so that they could say, you can do this, and this is how you do it, and to show you the ropes. And you know, my family was having a hard time finding jobs when I was in school, and I'm almost ready to drop out, you know, so I could go work and help them more. And Elba Sanchez, she was the director of the Spanish for Spanish speakers program at UC Santa Cruz. And she got me a job as a tutor because I kept my Spanish and I knew how to write it well. And so I was teaching kids of Latino families who were born here, knew how to speak but didn't know how to write. So we used to teach Spanish to Spanish speakers.
How beautiful.
And it was a beautiful program. And so she was amazing. She ended up being an altar girl for my wedding because she was so wonderful. And then I had also, my mother was a big inspiration. She was a giver. She would give her, get herself into debt to help others. And my family, it was always important to give and to help others, even if we didn't have a lot ourselves. So she was always a big inspiration, and education was a big push for us.
So these seem like mentors to you.
Yes.
For whom have you been a mentor?
Oh my goodness, a lot of young people. And I've been honored to have these women as my models.
Yeah.
And it showed me that there was a great need for that.
Yeah.
You know, it makes such a big difference. And I'm very grateful to my white mentor friends too. But when you see someone who looks like you and has gone through similar stories, it makes a huge difference, because you don't never think that you're gonna get to something like this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I would have never, ever thought, oh God, I would have never thought that this could ever happen to me, right? And the same thing with young people. So lots of families. It's really very rewarding to see the young people that I used to be part of the teen pregnancy prevention program, and see them running for office and being parents and professionals, and you know, or following their dreams, whether it's that they're doing cosmetology or whether they're becoming lawyers, you know, whatever it is, to see them grow up and be able to succeed and to have a stable life. You know, not all immigrants get to do that. And so that's been very inspiring, and to be someone that they can sort of say, oh, you know, she's like me. She had to learn English too, and she had to work and help her parents pay for the rent, and she interpret for her parents the same way that I'm going with my parents to the doctor. You know, that kind of stuff is so important.
It's having others step forward, you know, reaching out, and then the next generation, helping them to do the same that others helped you to do. Is there an important learning in your life that you believe has been key to your success?
Many lessons, but I have to say that speaking up when you see injustice, speaking up when you see something that is not going right, and to have that courage, even if it's at the risk of being labeled the troublemaker, or here she goes again. The same one who's always complaining about things or bringing things up, right? But the lesson, what has worked very well for me, is to do it with a calm tone, not combative, because that doesn't work, and people won't listen that way. And you know, to be calm, to have a nice smile. You can get away to say a lot of things with a beautiful smile, and that has worked very well. And you know, just trying to put in the people's shoes when they don't agree with you. Why is it that they're thinking that way? You know, sometimes it's ignorance, and sometimes it's lack of exposure and experience. You know, and to not to jump into conclusions, but to try to find what do you have in common with that person, and maybe then they can hear you. I mean, it doesn't always work, but a lot of times it just takes years and years, but it can be done sometimes.
So listening and learning is part of your lessons, huh?
Yeah.
And you've inspired so many people in your profession committed to community. Could you share with us what inspires you?
My community. You know, we're all fighters. We try. I mean, I admire a lot of our promotores, a lot of our volunteers. You know, they have 2 jobs, sometimes 3. They volunteer in their church. They help in their kids' school. They're traditional, a lot of them have traditional households where they cook, they clean for them, for others, they're babysitters, they work at grocery stores, and yet they still find time to help their community. You know, it's like, that's so powerful, and that's incredible. That's really hard work. You know, it's like, it's a lot. I mean, we work really hard. We think we work really hard, in social work and in health education and public health. But oh my God, it's nothing compared to what they manage.
Well, imagine the lives that they're living, and they still give back.
They still
have
give
time.
back.
They commit to it.
And young people
Yeah.
inspire me so much. Their energy, their thirst for making things better, and there's hope. They always have hope, and that's just how I was, and so I have that connection, you know, of wanting to have that youthful mind to keep going. Yes.
Well, that was actually one of my questions: is what is your hope for Marin? Now that you've spent all those decades serving, what are you hoping for Marin County?
I'm hoping, and we're getting there, but there's still a lot of people who don't see immigrants as an asset to this county. Mm-hmm. I want people to be able to appreciate multiculturalism and learn that we have a lot to give. We give a lot, and it's not just about taking. There's a lot of people who contribute to Marin, and a lot of people don't realize that. They you know, sometimes also those skills that I was mentioning that promotores and a lot of immigrants have are really good skills that a lot of people navigate two cultures, you know, like there's big assets. And financially, there's so many people who contribute to Social Security that they never claim it. And people don't talk about that. You know, when you have undocumented people who have a job, they contribute, they take it out of their paycheck.
Right.
But they're never going to be able to get that Social Security retirement. So that goes to the whole society, you know, and people don't ever think about things like that. So I'm hoping that Marin also, our nonprofits, we're getting there, we're learning to play together, but we really don't do it fully yet. We, you know, funding is set up to be competitive, and instead of working together to improve, oftentimes we feel like we have to compete with each other for the funds, and it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
We should be able to work together, work on those strengths, and try to figure out a way to do things, because no one can do things alone anymore.
Right.
This is a
we have to be together.
Work.
We have to cooperate. So, if you were to think about or choose one area of focus to speak about your legacy, what would that be?
I would say the health and well-being of immigrants, and youth and families. Yeah.
Well, thank you for giving so much of your career, your life, your commitment, your educational preparation to making our community better.
Thank you.
And I know you'll continue to do more and more.
Yes. I look forward to volunteering in a couple of years after I do my traveling.
So see the world a little bit and then give back. Yeah?
Yes, for sure.
Good for you.
For sure.
Well, I want to thank you. Thank you so much. So thank you, Berta, for sharing stories from your incredible life with us. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in. The Marin Women's Hall of Fame is a program of the YWCA Golden Gate Silicon Valley. If you would like to learn more about the Hall of Fame and our honorees, please visit www.yourywca.org. Thank you for joining us.